Alright, we'll carry on installing pieces on this Reflex S. Almost ready to put the meter on there now. We'll start with a couple of other pieces. Shutter release shaft, its spring, film release button and its spring. As you can see, the shutter release shaft has the shorter of the two springs. So I'm going to start with that. Rub a little bit of molybdenum up that shaft, just for good measure, and a bit on here where it's going to engage the back of this post, just to stop it being any high friction. That slides in there. You can see that when that's in position, it bears on the film release button too. Film release shaft, I should say, on the top. The film release button, add a little bit of lubricant in there where it runs on the shaft. Spring over the top, that pops on there. You can see how both of those levers act on that film release shaft there. Right, and on the top goes the exposure meter. First of all, I'm going to lock this screw with a couple of spots of lacquer, and then I'm going to apply a little bit of grease in there, but I can do that off camera. Okay, that's all I needed to do really, was just put a tiny spot of lacquer either side on that screw and a tiny patch of grease there to hold everything, to lubricate, make sure everything's lubricated there. Now the meter hooks in under that notch, and there's a little knot hole in the top of the body casting that catches a little lug on the bottom of the meter, which locates it neatly, and that's the idea. Now the cords have to run over the pulleys, and the plan for that is in the Retina 3S service manual, and it's pointless me trying to demonstrate it in a clearer fashion than it's in there. You can find it off my website. Okay, so now I've got to drag the cord down through this hole, round this pulley, and attach the ends to the drum here. And that's awkward, and I'm fairly sure I can't do that on camera. So I'm going to do that off camera, and I'll show you the finished results. Alright, while you've been in suspense, I've fitted the meter. That's sitting in place. The cords have all been routed correctly, and that's all running smoothly. So if you turn the drum here at the bottom, the drum at the top turns. I'll leave that in its neutral position. Next, I want to be fitting the cam that runs across here, the one that drives the mirror and the capping plate, and I've got a special bracket that holds the end of the spring on that in place, which I've got to go and find. Back shortly. Now Kodak made a clever little jig to do this, and it would have been available as a special tool that you could order from them, but it probably hasn't been available in a very long time. So I had to work out my own solution. I'll explain what this does in a minute. So that little bracket, which I've just fitted there, has a little notch in it here, and that's to hold the end of the spring, which has to be pre-tensioned about a turn and a half. before we fit the front. That's quite important. So I'll start now anyway with the cam, and inevitably you'll see that the cam has got marks on it. This is, someone's put a scratch on that. Now that must have been something to help them line it up. It must have been a visual cue to them. There was no need to do that, but they've done it. That's fine. So I'm putting some molybdenum grease on there to make sure that cam runs smoothly. I'm going to put some of this synthetic grease on the gear at the back. That's where it couples to the shutter cocking rack. And then this should fit into place in here. Now settling it down into place is always a bit of an act, and getting the alignment right even more so. Oh, that's just about fell in. You can see how this shaft runs at an angle like this. That's correct, and I felt that just drop into position, so that's ideal. Now I will lubricate this front cam. The gear on this drives the shutter. The outside edge here is a cam. That releases the mirror. That's all part of that system. So this drops on over here. And we have to rotate this 1.5 turns. And if I could do this on camera, I'll be very, very surprised. So I'm going to back out and see if I can achieve it. So I've got to hold that shaft down. That's the first turn. There's just a little bit of tension on that spring. Just there, but I've got to go a whole full turn from there. No, I felt that cam shaft at the back jump there, and it jumped a tooth or so, so I'm just going to reposition that back where it started. That's better. Get this front cam down. It's not sitting down properly. That's better. Yeah. That's the first part turn. Now I've got to get another full turn on that, and I might need other tweezers, so I'm going to go and find some stronger tweezers. I wasn't away 10 minutes, so I didn't have to edit anything. Right, let's see if we can do this. No. Yes. Right, so I've pre-tensioned that spring, and the tab end of the spring is sitting in that groove on that bracket that I've fitted there. So that's all ready now. That's ready to have the front fitted. So that'll be my next task. To fit the front, I've grabbed some more components. This is where we use those washers, those dished washers that we saw earlier. So we'll have that one. Concave side up at each of these four positions. I'll zoom back in now. And then on top of them, convex side up, we'll put their mates. That's set, ready to go. Now I've got to fit the front plate. Just check there's a bit of dust in there I didn't want. That's all looking good. We don't need to flick all those bits on the floor. We'll put those back in the container. Hopefully nothing got away. Just checking there's a spread of glue there when I fitted that piece. I don't think it's strong enough to cause me any harm, but I don't want it. Alright, that looks good. So I'm going to fit this in place. This arm goes in that gap there. This hole has to go over that gear, and after that we get on to the difficult stuff. So I lower that carefully over there. Can't feel that gear dropping in. Yeah, that's dropped in. I've got to do this without disturbing those washers, which are just sitting there. Now, I'm going to pull back this chrome trim so that'll drop down a bit. Then I have to hold my tweezers in there and press in the mirror so that it goes underneath that leather strip that I'd put on there, that buffer. Now I can put in 2 screws at the base, at the bottom edge. There's 4 fixing screws here. I'm just putting 2 of them in at the base. And I'm going to want 2 longer ones to go in at the top while I'm working on that. And they're in my kit of special parts for special occasions. Right, here we go. And these screws are just the same as the ones on the advance lever. So I just need to start that. This is just to keep those washers in position so they can't fall down and get away, which otherwise they would certainly do. Right, now we can pick the camera up. The washers can't get away. This whole cam will be kinked over, so it's going to be pushed across until it falls into place. I can tell by the position of the body it's still not clipped into place. So we're probably a tooth or so out. Oh, I can just feel that's just not even making it all. So I'll just press that across, see if I can pick up the hole in the casting with it. Come up. Across. Yeah, so far so good. Now if I hold down, press the shutter release button there, that you heard the mirror click up. I'm going to hold down the end of film shaft. Heard that click in, that was the gear engaging. And as I wind the advance lever, that doesn't quite cock the shutter. I'm 1 tooth out. I've got to take this out and try again. I'll do that off camera. I could be doing this 3 or 4 times. Well, I was lucky. On the second attempt it went straight through. I'll show you. Hold down the end of film lever, wind the advance, the shutter opens all the way and away it goes. So now I've just got to put in the proper 2 screws here, and they'll be done up loosely, and then following those screws we've put in the shaft that couples to the meter drum. But these screws don't get done up tight until that's in place, because it's awkward to position that. You don't need any extra fights. Let's have 4 screws for the front. I'll just do those down lightly. And next is our shaft. Now, I was careful to leave the slot in the drum with the slot vertical. There's a slot in the face of the drum that this thing couples to. So you need to leave it in the right place, otherwise you'll never find it. So I'm just putting a little bit of molybdenum on here. It doesn't need much, but getting that end in is sometimes tricky. That's quite sharp and square. It'll probably be hard to get that fed in. I'll drop that into position. I'll hold it down with the tip of a screwdriver and I'm just going to move it backwards and forwards. It dropped straight in. That's extremely unusual. It's not usually as kind as that. Here's a little pinion, idler pinion. I just need to lubricate the shaft on that a bit. That drops over that shaft. That front plate can be screwed down now. Now, regarding tightening these screws down, on this camera the instructions allow for using a dial gauge to pick the correct distance here from the film plane. Now that's fine if you've got a dial gauge, and I've got one right in front of me, but if you haven't, this is a good way of doing it. So what I do is just do up the screws, I run my screwdriver across and get this plate level. Now this will get you by if you haven't got a dial gauge, but I'll show you that method in a second. If you've only got one camera, and if you've only got the standard lens, this is perfectly acceptable, because you'll set the focus of your lens to suit the body afterwards. On this side, you've got more of a step here, you've got to watch that. Just run it over on these points. It's a little bit higher there. Just tighten that up slightly. Of course, doing it this way has one advantage. It means that your leatherettes won't show a sharp line across that joint, because both surfaces will be at the same height. It's not necessarily the correct height, but never mind. So I'm just sliding my screwdriver across there to pick whether those surfaces are level. Cameras, this is one of the reasons this is not a stunningly ideal reason, and the reason they tell you to use a dial gauge instead, is that the cameras have often been dropped. If they're dropped in their case, if they land on their nose, the pressure goes on here and this plate will bend. It'll get pushed downwards. Typically it's rigidly fixed at the top, it's weaker at the base. The lens will tilt down that way, and so the film, this will no longer be square with the film plane. Anyway, this looks quite good. And if you didn't have a dial gauge, that would get you by. Now I'm going to pause for a second and bring in a dial gauge. I'm not going to do it exactly the way I would normally do it, because that involves moving down to the shed and putting it on a big piece of ground cast iron there that I've got, but I'm not going to do that. I'll show you I'll give you the general idea. Back in a minute. Okay, well, to set this up correctly, I need to be able to have the shutter open while I've got it on with my jig. So I'll put the shutter release button back on, and here I've got a body top that has been suitably mutilated, and this is so that I can use it to hold the meter and other components in place while I'm working on the camera. You don't want the meter in particular coming adrift, because then the cord will come adrift, and if the cord comes adrift, well then obviously you're going to have to open the thing up and put it all back again, and that would be exceedingly tedious. Let's just get that in. So that top of the camera is on now firmly, my test top. So what I want to do is make sure the shutter's set to B, and it is. Screw in my cable release. Release the shutter. Now, here we get to the exciting bit. Somewhere here, if I can just see where I've dumped it, is my standard. This is designed to sit at the film plane. The height of this piece here is set so that it's exactly 476 millimeters from the film plane to the top of this. Now I can use my dial gauge, and basically what I do, I've got this back to front so I can't see it, I'll just lean across. You probably can't see the dial anyway, but normally what I do is set my dial to 0 at that point. This is normally done on a ground glass plate, so ground cast iron plate, so the magnetic stand is firmly fixed. Here of course it's drifting because it's just sitting there. But basically, without moving that about, what I do is I lift this, move my camera across, drop that on the deck, and I check the distance. Now you can't see that, I'm just going to swing that round so you can see what the dial is. But basically I just check that the needle comes to the same point. What we're doing is making sure we have exactly the same height at this point on our jig as we have at 4 points on this surface. Now if they're all correct, and you can adjust those by screwing your 4 screws in or out, then you know you're good. I'll reverse this so I can see the dial, and I'll do it while we're waiting. I'll probably go and do this down in the shed where I can get it on my normal gear. Let's just turn that round to 0. Hang on, that's the door. Right, where were we before we were so rudely interrupted? Okay, so first I'm going to get this dial gauge set so that everything works correctly. So I've got that dial set, and I'm just checking that I'll move that dial around to the 0 mark. Let's make sure that's in good contact. That's very good. Of course, it doesn't have to be rotated to the 0 mark, it can be any mark at all, so long as I can recognise it. And all I do, that's good. So that's our 40, what did I say it was? 476 millimetres, which is 1.874 inches. And it should be plus or minus a thou. Right, so starting with that as my 0 point, I'll shift the camera, check, and adjust this to suit until that 0 comes in. Now I just adjust this at each of the 4 corners. This is an annoyance as the back catches on stuff while you're moving it about. This is a bit touchy because normally that magnetic base is magnetically fixed. Of course it's just floating at the moment, so this will do for demo purposes. Will give you an idea how it's done. Back on there, you bugger. That's very good. You might need to go around them all once or twice, because as you alter one it will certainly shift the positions relative to the other ones. That's very good. Okay, but basically that's how it's done, and that should set the height for that component. Now I can get on to the next part. Thank you.